Look, let's just talk about the developments over the last 3 to 4 days in the region, because it really feels like there has been an intensification of violence on all fronts. We saw the attack on the Rafah encampment, the subsequent international condemnation that came through for Israel. Of course, U.S. overnight saying that Israel haven't crossed the red line. In addition to that, you've still got Houthi attacks on vessels. You've got Iranian elections coming up. Uranium enrichment is still going on. There's a lot going on in the region right now. How significant do you think this moment is in history? I know it's a big question, but there is a lot going on.
I think it's a big question, but I think it's a fair question. I think this is a battle for the soul of the rules-based international world order that has been at play since the end of World War II. That's how consequential what's going on right now truly is. In one end, you have the Iranian elections. You have the potentially second JCPOA at play. No one really wants war and conflict in the region. But at the same time, we are all looking for a credible de-escalation process, an off-ramp, if you will, to climb down from what truly is a consequential time in history and also for the region. So it's risk on, in a way, but everyone is looking to find a credible solution. And I think they will look at the U.S. much more so than before to try to understand what pathway they lay out.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We spoke to some analysts, or we have been speaking to analysts the last few days, especially, I think, after the Rafah attack over the weekend. People are saying that the only country at this point that can exercise some control or leverage over Israel is the United States. And now, in the last 24 hours, we've had commentary from the United States suggesting that Israel didn't cross the red line. I do wonder also how you think the calculus may change given there's a U.S. election coming up. And if there is a change in presidency and President Trump does come back again, what does that mean for the region?
Look, that's the trillion-dollar question for the whole world. And the whole world is watching to the extent that the traditional alliance structures and the world order that we have been living in since the end of World War II is changing. And this conflict is also very important within the context of the larger geostrategic battle that is going to be U.S. versus China. And the whole world is watching in terms of what does it mean to be under a U.S.-led system. So it's actually very consequential. I think the U.S. elections are one of the most consequential elections of recent history. It will have implications in terms of the transatlantic partnership. It will have implications in terms of the South China, East China Sea. And in a world where we seem to have pressed the pause button, if not the stop button, on the hyper-globalized world that we've been living in, the concepts of friendshoring, nearshoring, and regional powers are going to become more important. But all eyes are on White House.
People say that, looking over to another war that's still raging on, that President Putin is sitting, waiting for the possible return of President Trump because he senses that there will be less support or at least Republican interest in continuing to help Ukraine with their military efforts. How do you see a return of Trump affecting what happens in Ukraine?
Well, before we come to the return of Trump, let's just acknowledge the fact that the recent cabinet reshuffle that Putin has made really signals that he's in for the long haul, both to stay in power, but also for a prolonged war and conflict in the region. So time plays in Putin's favor to a certain extent. And again, the one variable that can change things is what kind of a stance will the U.S. take? Now, the prospective Trump presidency also brings with it the possibility that he will withdraw support from Ukraine, in which case they will have to negotiate. But of course, again, to go back to my previous point on Israel, Gaza, what is a credible off-ramp? To negotiate, both sides have to walk away with something that they can live with. And again, U.S. and White House will be a very important driver of that.
Let's bring it back to markets, because I think what is also interesting about this, and you saw me speaking about oil at the beginning of the show, there isn't a lot of geopolitical premium that's being priced into financial assets here, and there's still plenty of countries within the region that are seeing a significant amount of interest for investment, IPOs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How does one factor in for the geopolitical premium at this point? Because the markets are not working in your favor.
That's a great question. And all investors have the memory of a goldfish, and I'll say that as an investor as well, given the long run. So everyone wants a reform story, everyone wants a growth story. I think the way to factor in geopolitical risk is going to be initially just to acknowledge that everything may change. and to try to price that risk, which is going to be very dynamic. You talk about commodity prices, energy prices. The importance of energy security is going to be magnified over the next, I would say, 3 to 4 or 5 years. And it's just a matter of acknowledging that geopolitical risk exists. It will be dynamic. And the way that we used to price risk will no longer cut it.